Hello and welcome back to the second video now, talking about the Anapanasati Sutta, or mindfulness of breathing, which is a very loaded sutta. In the last video, I talked about the course of this sutta a little bit. The Buddha talks about how mindfulness of breathing, what's the term that he uses, fulfills the four foundations of mindfulness, and how the four foundations of mindfulness fulfill the seven bojjhangas, or the seven factors of enlightenment. This sutta is so dense, and it's hard to impart the how and the why. I've already started it a little bit just at the beginning, and I just want to, I'm trying to give a framework of what this sutta is pointing at. It's going to take a long time. This is a very dense sutta. It has so many implications in between the lines. So in doing this, I was trying to give you this framework without reading the sutta to you. My intention is to go ahead and read this sutta to anybody who doesn't have access to it. Just read it live to you straight out of the book so that you can hear the wording. And that'll also give you a kind of a feel of, as you just hear the words, how hollow they can kind of sound to the mind when it's not really acutely, like, reading between the lines, really investigating, okay, what is the implication? It takes a lot of time to read suttas and really understand, because you have to have a familiarity with the entire teaching and sort of the angle that the Buddha is getting at, where his direction is. We can kind of bounce off the words. So that being said, in the first video, we've really only so this is the Majjhima Nikaya. These are expensive. They're translated by, you can see, Bhikkhu Nyanamoli and Bhikkhu Bodhi. These are translated for free. In Buddhist culture, money is not made anywhere. In Buddhism, it's all based on donation. Buddhism has always received its support from generosity, and there is a karmic sort of component to that. But it also, keeps it authentic, where, these teachings would have died 2,500 years ago if people hadn't given to support them. And that really means a lot. The reason we have access to these is because there's been a constant chain of human beings giving their monetary support to keeping them alive. There's been steady monasteries that were always supported by people bringing food, by people building the monastery. Monks didn't do these things. They still don't do these things. They don't make money. They don't generate money. It is all based on donation. And if you really let that kind of percolate in the mind stream, you'll kind of understand the depth of that. And if you're new to these teachings, it might be hard to realize it if you haven't felt the depth of these teachings, what they can really do to you, how deeply they can affect you. Anyways, that being said, these books are expensive. They're about $50 a piece, and there are 5 of them. They're kind of pricey for a book. They're loaded and they're hard to read, but you can buy them if you want. Majjhima Nikaya, Anapanasati Sutta, it's right about here. In the first video, I've literally gotten through that. That's 15 minutes of talking. Everything that I went over in the last video is really only about that, and we got through this section, and then I kind of didn't get deep into even just this paragraph, and we went on. This one is about bringing the awareness to the mind. So we've arrived. We've gotten in touch with our breath. We've gotten in touch with our body. We've started to sort of generate an energy of tranquilizing, of calming, of getting in touch with the body. So loaded. There's so much just in a half a page. So I'm hoping that the first video coupled with this video are starting to show you the density of these teachings, and just this aspect of personal experience. If you're familiar with, spiritual paths, self work, transmission of teachings, especially the transmission of ancient teachings through shamanic or priesthoods or monastic guilds or a tribal sort of passing down, a rite of passage of wisdom teachings. I want to frame this as well as I can, and I'm hoping that you're starting to get kind of a feel for it, that when these things are written down, they can really go right by you. And then I want to do a little bit of reading just to give you a flavor of how very sort of mechanical it sounds as you read it, and how you can miss everything that we've talked about so far. So just as, and the reason for this is that I'm going to have to read some of this next part, which I skipped over in the last video, just so that you understand the context of the exact wording, and then we can get very, very deep down into the implications of what that means. So just the beginning of the sutta a little bit. The Buddha poses the question to his bhikkhus. Bhikkhu is the ancient Pali term for a monk or a monastic, or actually even just a practitioner. Monks weren't called monks when they first came around. They were just, I'm not sure about the exact etymological meaning of the word. I would equate it to just being like dear ones or fellows, or those who have, taken up the path, so to speak. So you can feel a familiarity to that term just because you're not a monk. He is talking to anyone who is putting these teachings into practice. So he poses this question. He says, "And how, bhikkhus, is mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that it is of great benefit and of great fruit?" He says, "Here a bhikkhu gone to the forest or the root of a tree, somewhere where you're secluded. You sit yourself down, cross your legs, you establish mindfulness in front of you. Breathing in, you understand I breathe in long. Breathing out long, I understand I breathe out long. Breathing in short, I understand I breathe in short. Breathing out short, I understand I breathe out short." So he's saying, you're aware of the breath and its nature. If you're breathing in long, you're kind of in tune with that. You're like, I'm breathing, shallow, or I'm breathing long. I'm breathing fast, or I'm breathing slow. You're tuning into your rhythm. And I believe in the notes, Bhikkhu Bodhi talks about how basically breathing in short is it means you're deepening, because as you breathe in long, you're breathing in long and deep, and you're kind of calming. But as you start to really sink in, you're kind of you start breathing in shorter, just almost like sleeping breathing. It's still slow. It's just not as deep, not as long of a breath, because you're settling. So just the implication of that, which we can read right over in this kind of language. So he goes on, breathing in long, I know I breathe in long, breathing in short, etc., etc. And he continues, he says, he trains thus: I shall breathe in, experiencing the whole body. I shall breathe out, experiencing the whole body. I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. It's a formation, it was formed. I shall breathe out. So it's using the breath as an anchor to tune into the body, become aware of the body, feeling the expansion and the contraction of the body as it breathes. The whole field of experience, really tuning into that as a mechanism to settle the mind. It goes deeper and deeper. So tranquilizing the body with the breath, so that it's not just a one-time thing. Because when we do a one-time thing, we do this, and then it's over, the mind wants to jump up and take us somewhere else. So we're using the breath to continue doing something. It's helping us maintain our presence and our mindfulness with our practice. So from bodily formation, he goes on to say, And this is the part that I had kind of gone over just to give a framework, because just this one paragraph is going to be the rest of this video. It's very dense. So let's get into it. I'm just going to read this off for you. He trains thus: I shall breathe in experiencing rapture. He trains thus: I shall breathe out experiencing rapture. Training thus: I shall breathe in experiencing pleasure, breathe out experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe in experiencing the mental formation. I shall breathe out experiencing the mental formation. I shall breathe in tranquilizing the mental formation. I shall breathe out tranquilizing the mental formation. Now, the in and out breath is again the steadiness of this experience. And what we've really gone to in this is we've gone from body to feelings in the 4 foundations of mindfulness through mindfulness of breathing. So this is where the Anapanasati Sutta meets the Satipatthana Sutta. And we're only halfway through, because there's, of course, mind and mind objects, or mind dhammas, is the 4 foundations. At this point, what is happening is we've tranquilized the body. And we're influencing, as I spoke about in the last video, where we're giving the nudge to feel pleasure, to, arise this rapture. Now, it's said in teachings, in these teachings, that when we give attention to the body, when we are mindful of the body, rapture naturally arises. And I hinted at this also. When everything starts to settle, when we tune into this, there's a natural rapture. The Buddha's partially talking about, okay, so expand on that. You want to help this grow. So you're consciously devoting yourself to feeling a pleasure, to feeling a rapture, a goodness. You're feeding and watering this. The next segment is pretty elusive, especially because of the language being used and that the language is being translated is always a big part of these teachings. Now, these monks that translate these do an incredible job, and they devote so much more than you would think, so much of their energy to being very, very clear about what's being said, as clear as they possibly can. And they put notes in to say, we don't have an English word for this because our language is kind of dead, honestly, when it's trying to describe things like this. I would say, personally, we're very scientific. We don't have a lot of feeling in our language. We're not a love language. We're not a feeling language. We're an analytical language, and it can harm us on this path. Language, you have to be mindful of language along with everything else. Don't feel overwhelmed, please. In this next section, he talks about experiencing the mental formation. I breathe in, experiencing the mental formation, breathing out, experiencing the mental formation. The bhikkhus, I don't know if it's Nyanamoli or Bhikkhu Bodhi, who has included this note, but they say in it, they describe the mental formation as perception and feeling, which is tranquilized by the development of the successively higher states of serenity and insight. In essence, I train this breathing in, experiencing rapture, breathing out, experiencing rapture, breathing in, experiencing pleasure, breathing out, experiencing pleasure. And then he goes to breathing out, experiencing the mental formation. That is the mental formation. That's the mental formation. So what he's saying is becoming aware as we've calmed down, we've become mindful, we're tuning into the breath, we're settling into the body, we're becoming aware of the body, we're inviting the body to calm, to settle, we're loosening our muscles, we're feeling rapture. We're letting tension drain out of our face, out of our jaw, out of our body. We're feeling the expansion and contraction. We're tuning into this vehicle that we're in, doing so, calming it, intentionally calming it, and the natural calming of it as it is being paid attention to, which we find is a mental formation. So the Buddha is saying, now that this has happened, now we're going to get out of it and notice it happening. Experience the mental formation. So kind of experience the experience. Already we've gotten pretty like esoteric maybe, or I don't think that's the right word, but just pretty profound. This is very, very brainy stuff. It's experiential stuff. It is not something that you can just watch a million videos about or read a million books about. It's an experience to be experienced individually by the wise, is the Buddha's own words about his teaching. He says this teaching is something that has to be experienced. You have to put them into practice. So there's this mental formation that arises around the experience of taming the body, of calming the mind. There's an awareness of it, so we breathe in, becoming aware of that mental formation, becoming aware of the experience. And then we tranquilize that mental formation as well. Everything that arises, we want to notice it and we want to be gentle with it. Not, weak. I don't know if gentle puts a connotation in your way of experiencing that word. Just gentle as in like it's a viper, it's going to bite you. What I said in the last video about creating an atmosphere where a sort of chemical reaction can take place. This is a very delicate framework that we're building in our mind, in our emotional structure, in our limbic system, with our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, our autonomic nervous system. We are getting that thing to settle, and we want it to stay there without. In the Bhagavad Gita, a really great analogy is put forth as far as what we want to do with our mind when we are meditating. It's a great analogy. The Buddha loves analogies, and he says it's the best way to teach. Many people understand a lot better with an analogy than they will with anything else. I'll use another one too in the Bhagavad Gita. One is put forth that is like a candle's flame in a place without wind. That is how we want our mind and heart to be. This is an explicit indication of the volatility of our autonomic nervous system. It is way wilder than we even want to admit. We go from this peaceful place to out just in a millisecond. It's really easy to lose this level of very steadiness, this ease, this peace, this tranquility, this samadhi. This is what samadhi is, this concentration where, this is where we can see our death and be at peace with it. This is where we can process profound trauma, I mean dark stuff, and actually breathe our way through it. I forget who it is that says it. It's a psychologist, and he says your therapist can only take you as far as they've gone themselves. Well, I've gone a lot farther than all of my therapists, and I've been court ordered in my youth to be with therapists. Not a lot of them have been as traumatized. I don't want to get into my personal story. I'm just trying to impart to you that these are experiences we go through alone. Even if the therapist is in the room and they've sort of guided you there, you're the one who has to go through the door. And we do this through this steadiness, through this samadhi. And even if, we don't use the word samadhi, it's still this energy of steadiness that gets us through those things, because the mind can't step out of its experience and objectify from it when it's the subject. We have to be able to pull out, to reframe something, to even, with serious trauma, post-traumatic stress, the individual, and I have had this experience personally in my own life, so I speak from experience as that person. You're in your trauma. You don't know that it's not happening, even though you kind of know that, I'm not in, the Vietnam War anymore. I'm back home. I, of course, was not in the Vietnam War, but it's sort of a cliche, version of just trying to relate this to you. We see it a lot with veterans. If they come home, they know they're not in the war, but when they hear thunder, they don't, because they haven't been able to objectify and get all the way out of that experience and contemplate consciously, mindfulness, that experience. We can't just like, this happened to me. It happened to me. I had to mindfully, like, okay, that happened. Why did it happen? What were the circumstances of it happening? You can't do that with trauma or any pain if you cannot step into this energetic atmosphere inside your mind, inside your heart, inside your system. I never say mind without saying heart, because there's plenty of science to interview. I suggest starting with Joe Dispenza in some of his books. He talks a lot about heart rate variability, how it connects to the mind. Really, all these things are talked explicitly about in these teachings. That's where I get my knowledge from. But in modern language, it's framed really well by him and his books. Essentially, thought becomes emotion. Emotion always has a thought counterpart, and vice versa. Thought always has an emotional counterpart. You can think this, but you always have a feeling about it, and that's based on perception. Perception and feeling is mental formation. It's one of, I think the term is Sankara. It's one of the 5 aggregates, mental formations or volitions. It's a major functioning aspect of Buddhist psychology and theory, or metaphysics, I guess, if you want to say, is that they go hand in hand. You have a perception, there's feeling and perception. They're too intimate. And the Buddha says this, they're not, they're separate, but they're so wound up, they're so woven together that when one moves, the other moves. So he states them as sort of a joint thing. So that's one paragraph. We're already at 22 minutes. I'm going to carry on a little bit just because I don't want to stop too dry here. After stepping out of the body being tamed, the body calming, we now have the body calm, and we see this as a mental formation. Perception of the body, because we're perceiving it, we're being mindful of our body, and from that the feeling comes. Now we're noticing mind and feeling working together with the breath, breathing in, aware of it, breathing out, aware of it. There's a whole, you're starting to see when we first come to these teachings, we look at the breath and we're like, gosh, that's boring. Really, just following? No, not following the breath. You just, it gets you nothing. And it's very hard, but you also see it's very hard to explain the exact intricacies of what breath really is doing and what the Buddha is saying to do with your breath. So the breath is anchoring us to this very directed strategy for developing one thing: samadhi, deep concentration, the kind of concentration that is inassailable, the kind of concentration where traumas or deep feelings, they can be I don't want to use the wrong language here, where they are no longer in control of us, where we have a choice, where we can step out of them, we can change our beliefs, we can alter our beliefs, we can heal, we can deeply heal our beliefs, our misperceptions, traumas, etc., etc. This steps into mind. So the next step is I shall breathe in, experiencing the mind, because this is mind. They kind of flow from one to the next. So breathe in, experiencing mind, breathe out, experiencing mind, tranquilizing the mind, gladdening the mind, and concentrating the mind. Um, Vipassana, which is insight. It's a whole branch of meditation called Vipassana, and it's really wrong. The actual term is Samatha Vipassana, and they can't be separated from each other. Even in Thailand, amongst the monastics, the monks, within the monastic communities, there's a natural tendency in all of us to want insight. We're like, I want the insight. I want the insight. I want to see deeper into this stuff, and we get kind of anxious. And the great gurus or the great teachers in that lineage and in all lineages really do this where they have to like calm us down and be like, okay, you can't have that one without the samatha is this calmness. There's I think it's Bhikkhu Chandako or Ajahn Chandako wrote a book called A Honed and Heavy Axe, and it's a beautiful simile for what samatha and vipassana are. So insight he likens to the sharpness of an axe, and samatha or calm abiding, this soft like soothed energy in the heart. That's the heaviness of it. So you can take a razor and you can hit it against a tree and get nowhere. It's super sharp though, right? And you can take a baseball bat or a sledgehammer and wail on a tree and it won't do anything. This is explicitly coming from Ajahn Chandako. This is his simile. It's a beautiful simile and a great analogy for that. These two are also intertwined. You can't have insight if you're not calm, because mental formation, perception, and feeling work together. So if you're not calm enough so that the feelings don't activate you, a response that's not based on logic, that's based on craving, desire, feeling, desire, all that. It's the property of craving. The heart, feeling, emotion doesn't do logic. So we have to have the calm enough to not be reactive, so that when the insight comes, you can have insight. When you're really steady in a meditation retreat, you can actually watch this in yourself where you have an insight and it doesn't sink in because of a feeling. You have a feeling and you kind of reject it, and it really gets crazy when you see yourself do it. When you're actually have become aware, you're like, I just rejected truth. Are you kidding me? Why? Feeling because you have a pain or a discomfort. It's usually a lot wrapped up with ourselves and our personality. And this is going to lead this video series deeply into the three characteristics the Buddha taught, which are the inherent suffering of things, or the inherent, not so much like suffering, heavy suffering. It can just be a unsatisfactory nature of things. Things are impermanent and flowing and they just don't satisfy. And that's the second one, is the unsatisfactoriness, the impermanence of it. Those two are kind of also inextricably connected. This is where language fails. We talk about one thing and we don't realize how it connects to another. We have to pay really close attention. The third aspect is the selflessness of these things. So we take things to be ourself, but when our perceptions are so changeable and our feelings along with them, that the feeling changes when the perception changes. The feeling is us, right? That's who we are. But tomorrow we'll feel completely different. We're not the feeling. We're not our anger. We're not this. And when we look closely at them, we get that felt sense of it. Basically, the whole house of cards falls down, but it's rebuilding itself behind the scenes. As we see this part's happening. We look over here, this part. It's like weeds growing. In the Bhagavad Gita, the path to enlightenment is related to an asvattha tree, which is like a bodhi tree. It has its branches. Their branches grow down into the roots. They're a really cool looking tree. So it grows up and it grows out branches, and then they'll put down tap roots. So there'll be this gnarly looking thing with like all these branches going down into the dirt. It's just a knotted mess, really. That's what the mind is, our attachment to craving. That is what in the Bhagavad Gita it's likened to. And it's a very good analogy as well. So all this coming to in the sutta, concentrating the mind now, and then with that hard fought, hard won, hard earned, concentrated mind, the next stages, and I'll read these off that he guides us to, is we train thus: we shall breathe in contemplating impermanence, breathe out contemplating impermanence, which when you're in this flow state, it's obvious, but we want to direct our attention to it also, is what he's saying. You see the mind, you see the malleability, you see when you practice this stuff, and then you get to that steadiness as you're sitting in meditation and you're calming yourself. You're like, wow, I was so coming out of the world, it all changed and it's all conditioned. All the conditions, when I sit down and I direct my mind and I calm, and you come to this state, it becomes really like, wow, yeah, impermanence. Like, this is a changing of flow. You get into flow, the flow of, sports gurus talk about this kind of stuff. Musicians talk about this. Artists talk about this kind of stuff. We all know what it is. Whatever we do, we've all felt this before. But the science of how it's activated, it's an ancient science. It's here. It's been sitting over in the gutter for thousands of years. Most of us walk by it because we have to go through all of the, forest, the dark forest in here to get there, to get to where, we have free will over that and we can direct it at our life. Getting in this flow state. So from this flow state, we see the impermanence, but now the Buddha is saying, now look closely at the impermanence. Let it really sink in now that you've finally gotten to this clean room, area, this chemically sound environment to have this experience. Now let it penetrate as deeply as you possibly can, this impermanence. He goes on to say, this is core Buddha stuff. Impermanence, breathing it in, breathing it out, contemplating fading away. So there's the impermanent nature of things, and then their decay, their dissolution. Things just kind of vanish. Our bodies, when we die, they get worm-eaten by maggots. They rot. They pus up. We don't see any of that because we're afraid of it in this culture. In the Buddha's time, they had carnal grounds. They would pile up bodies, and these wandering sadhus, these men contemplating the mind, death, life, what we are, they would go there and they would observe, the states of decay so that they could separate from themselves. It helped them to realize, why hold on to this? This is inherently going to happen someday. There's nothing to be afraid of about it. It's going to happen anyways. Who cares? Don't work yourself up about it, but recognize it so that while you are here, you are living from a place of truth. That can be pretty deep and profound for some people. Anyways, dissolution of the body decays, turns to bone, bones crumble into dust, and then it's gone. There's nothing left of it. And we see this in every fool that thought he could beat it. It's a great movie for this is Troy. I forget the actor's name. He plays as Odysseus, and he says, men, we want our names to last forever, blah, 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 blah. And he's talking about him and Achilles, and their names will last forever. Well, in the real world, we made up a crazy movie story that's nothing like what they were. We don't remember them. Even so, all I'm trying to say is, Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, even Pythagoras, the Buddha, anyone, their name is bound to be forgotten, no matter how long it lasts. We don't know who the real them was. The minute they're dead, the minute you're dead, you're kind of forgotten. My mother died. She died tragically in a plane crash when I was 23. It was awful. The town that I grew up in, no one could handle it. I had just moved away. I came back to town and was flooded by an ocean of people that were completely devastated. My mother was a very charming and lovable woman. So this whole town was really grief-stricken. I was actually studying Deepak Chopra's, he had a book on death and dying, and I was in the middle of it. So grateful for that, because when that hit, when I got that phone call, I hung up the phone and I sat down and I meditated. And then I listened to Let It Be by the Beatles. That was a potent experience. But anyways, where was I going with that? I'm sorry. I digress too much. I forgot my mother, to recognize that even my own mother, our memories aren't our reality. Without mindfulness and meditation, we're not even living in a present moment while we have it, much less after it's gone. We we go to dust. Everything does, though. I don't want to get anyone depressed, because this is liberating when we see, there's nothing here to hold on to. This is the nature of it. We don't have to judge ourselves because we're not, neither is anybody else. And if they think they are, they're kidding themselves. You're nothing except how open your heart can be. We're all seeking connection, but we're all too dang vulnerable to open up to that vulnerability to have real contact. You can't open up without revealing that tender underside. And from there is where you have real connection. You must practice this if you want to live a full life. There's just no way around it. The two are completely tied, like so many things that we've been investigating just in this video. So, contemplating fading away. Again, from this calm, stable place that we've arrived in, where we've sunk down into the body and we've tamed sympathetic nervous system, we've calmed the limbic system, we're in the present moment, we're in a harmonious place, hopefully from ethical conduct that we've been practicing. We're stepping away from, this energy in us that leads us out. We're starting to see what it does, that it takes us where we don't actually want to go, even though it seems as though it does. We want pleasure, we think it's there, and it's not. It always leads to the same hole in the road over and over again. And the next after that is contemplating cessation, contemplating relinquishment, breathing in, contemplating these things. So this is really deep, and we're already so long again. From this state, really letting impermanence sink in, really contemplating the fading away, the ethereal nature of our experience, all these things that we take to be solid, all these things that we take to be fulfilling, really from this place where we are feeling fulfilled. That is the key. We have to soothe ourselves. The Buddha says, be self-soothing. A wise wanderer, a good monk is self-soothing. We have to learn this. This is so important. That's why with the breath. From that place, from already being content, we see this impermanent nature of things, this external world. And from that, we really start to lessen our general addictive tendencies. And I'm talking to you from experience. I have more than one addiction. And, not ashamed to say, because I don't go to NA, I don't go to AA, because I don't need to, because I have this practice. Because you can get to the deep, inside the middle of your brain, root and stem of this stuff. And I'm not saying that I'm enlightened or that I've completely uprooted it, but I've broken its branches. And when it tries to put out a taproot, I kind of smack its hand away and I say, I see you, because I give a lot of energy and attention to this. These are very powerful practices, deeply powerful practices that create tectonic shifts in who we are, who we think we are. And then it goes to that level where, man, if I was that, but it keeps growing too. It's the self, the idea of a self. When you see how permeable you can be, how free you can be, that all starts to destabilize too. So the last part of this is to contemplate relinquishment, and that is from this place, breathing in, contemplating the relinquishment of these attachments, to really get in touch with the impermanence of things. And this is right view and right intention, really, is to let these things be, to not go for them anymore, to practice in this state the non-attachment, the non, the relinquishment of your investment in not everything. Don't go crazy with me here, but things you're invested in, contemplate them. A big part of meditation, vipassana, is the contemplation of these things, but framing them all in basically the way this sutta is talking about. Calming first, reflecting on them, and it can be hours and hours, days, months, years of contemplating different aspects of our personality, how we drive, but it all starts to become clear. We start to see how it all kind of follows the same map, the same outline, and we see, it's not a giving up of something. It's not like a sacrificing, like, oh, I really like this, but I'm going to give it away for some ridiculous reason. No, it's like, wow, I don't need this anymore. You just kind of like, and then we're lighter. That's the relinquishment that we're talking about, is getting us to this very beautiful space where we can finally really detach from it and then be free, really free, truly. It's that butterfly experience where, this ground-bound critter, this caterpillar, is now liberated with wings. We've gone through, that's what we're doing. We're building a cocoon where we can separate, where we can totally transform, where we can evolve to that higher human that is inherent in us all, to connect these two things, to balance them, these dualities, to free ourselves from all influences, and then have our mind be guided by true wisdom and insight rather than compulsive cravings and desires. Okay, so we've gotten through one full page of this very profound sutta. We'll stop there, and I will see you in the next video. Be well.